When I opened the door, my son didn't say anything. He just stood there under the porch light, shoulders slightly hunched, like he expected the door to slam before he finished breathing. I hadn't seen him in almost 11 months. Addiction ages a person in strange ways. Sometimes it makes them look older. Sometimes younger. With him, it had always been both at the same time. That night he looked tired, not the restless, twitchy kind of tired I remembered. This was quieter. His eyes stayed on the ground, like he was studying the cracks in the porch instead of the man standing in front of him. "Hi, Dad." His voice was softer than I remembered. Behind me, I heard the bedroom door open down the hallway. My wife didn't come closer, but I knew she was there. Listening, waiting, my son shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I know it's late," he said. "I just didn't know where else to go." That line used to make me angry. I'd heard it too many times over the years, usually right before something disappeared from the house, but this time he didn't rush his words. He didn't step forward either. He stayed exactly where he was, like he understood the invisible line between the porch and the living room. "I'm not asking to stay forever," he added quietly. "Just a little while." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then from down the hallway, my wife finally said something. And the way she said it told me immediately that this night was already heading somewhere none of us were ready for. "Don't let him in." My wife rarely raised her voice. Even during the worst years of our son's addiction, she usually spoke in the same calm tone she used for everything else. That quiet patience had carried us through hospital visits, missing money, and one unforgettable night when the police brought him home at sunrise. But the voice that came from the hallway now wasn't calm, it was tired. The kind of tired that builds up slowly over years until it hardens into something close to fear. "Don't let him in," she repeated. My son heard it too. I saw his jaw tighten slightly, though he kept his eyes on the porch boards. I rubbed the back of my neck and stepped halfway into the doorway, careful not to invite him inside by accident. "She's right to be angry," I said. He nodded immediately. "I know." That surprised me more than anything. In the past, he would have argued. Explained. Promised things he couldn't deliver. He used to talk fast when he felt cornered. Tonight he just stood there, quiet. "I messed up," he said after a moment. "A lot." Down the hallway, my wife walked closer. Her footsteps stopped where the living room light barely reached. "You stole from us," she said. Her words were steady, but sharp. "You broke into this house twice. You lied about being clean. And the last time you left, you took my mother's necklace." The porch light buzzed softly above us. My son swallowed. "I know." Another silence followed, then he said something that made the situation feel suddenly more complicated than I expected. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness." He finally looked up at me. "I just need one chance to prove something first." My wife stepped into the living room light slowly, like she had already rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. She didn't look at our son right away. Her eyes stayed on me. That was always how these things worked between us. Decisions about him had never been just about him. They were about what we were willing to survive again. "You remember what happened the last time?" she said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The last time had started almost exactly like this. A late-night apology. A promise that things were different. A few weeks where everything felt normal again, then the money from the kitchen drawer disappeared, then the tools from the garage. Then the necklace. Our son shifted on the porch. "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said. My wife finally looked at him. Her expression didn't soften. "That's good," she replied. "Because we don't." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. For a moment, I thought he might leave. Honestly, part of me expected it. Facing consequences had never been his strength, but instead, he reached slowly into the pocket of his jacket. My body tensed automatically. He noticed. "I'm not pulling anything weird," he said quickly. Then he took out a small folded piece of paper and held it out toward me without stepping inside. I hesitated before taking it. It looked like a printed schedule. Dates. Times. Locations. At the top of the page was a heading that made my wife scoff quietly from behind me. Recovery meetings, weekly attendance. She crossed her arms immediately. "Those are easy to print," she said, and honestly. I had been thinking the exact same thing. I didn't invite him inside right away. We stood there on the porch for another minute, the cold night air slipping through the open doorway. My wife waited behind me, arms folded, her silence saying more than anything else. Finally I stepped aside. 3 days, I said. Both of them looked at me. He can stay 3 days. We'll talk after that. My wife's expression tightened instantly, but she didn't argue. Not yet. She just turned and walked back down the hallway. That silence between us was heavier than a fight. My son stepped inside carefully, almost like he was entering someone else's house. The first thing I noticed was what he didn't do. He didn't wander around. He didn't ask for food. He didn't head straight for the couch like he used to. He just stood near the door. "Thank you," he said quietly. I nodded toward the small guest room near the kitchen. "You remember where the blankets are?" He did. The door closed a few seconds later, leaving the house strangely quiet again. When I returned to the bedroom, my wife was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "You know how this ends," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was something worse, certain. "I gave him 3 days, I replied. "You gave him a door," she corrected. That sentence stayed in my head the rest of the night, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. But the next morning, something happened that made the situation feel just a little more complicated than either of us expected. It was something small, almost unnoticeable, but it was the first crack in the version of our son we thought we already understood. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning, not because of noise, because of silence. When someone with my son's history stays in your house, sleep becomes shallow. Every creak of the floorboards used to mean a cabinet opening or a drawer sliding shut, but that morning, the house felt still. I checked the clock, 6:10, normally he would have slept until noon. That had been his routine for years when things were bad. I got out of bed and walked toward the kitchen. The light was already on. For a second, my stomach tightened. Old instincts. My eyes went straight to the counter where my wallet usually Saturday, still there. Then I noticed him. My son was standing by the sink, rinsing a coffee mug. He turned when he heard me. "Oh. Morning." His voice sounded slightly embarrassed, like I had caught him doing something private. "You're up early," I said. He shrugged. "Couldn't sleep much." I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I noticed something else. His phone sat on the table, face up, unlocked. That alone was strange. During the worst years, his phone had been practically glued to his hand. Messages, calls, things he didn't want anyone seeing. Now it just sat there, buzzing occasionally with short notifications. He noticed me glance at it. "Just reminders," he said casually. "For what?" He hesitated for half a second. "Stuff I'm trying to stay consistent with." It wasn't a suspicious answer, but something about the way he said it made me wonder if there was more behind those reminders than he wanted to explain. And later that afternoon, I accidentally discovered the first clue that things weren't quite what they seemed. The discovery happened by accident. I was in the garage that afternoon, digging through a box of old extension cords, when my son walked past the open door with his jacket on. "Heading out?" I asked. He stopped. "Yeah. I'll be back in a couple hours." "Where?" The question came out automatically. "Old habits," he rubbed the back of his neck. "Just meeting someone." That answer immediately set off alarms in my head. Meeting someone had always meant the same thing before. Dealers, friends from the worst parts of his life, people who showed up only when things were falling apart. "Who?" I asked. He hesitated. "A guy from a group." "Recovery?" "Yeah." He said it quickly. Like he knew it sounded suspicious. I watched him walk down the driveway and disappear around the corner. For about 20 minutes, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my wife. "He's not at any meeting." I stared at the screen. "What do you mean?" I typed back. A second later she sent a photo. It was the printed meeting schedule he had given us the night before. One of the times was circled. Under it she had written, "I called the place." Another message followed. "There's no meeting there today." My chest tightened slowly. I looked out the garage door at the empty street. For a moment, the last few days replayed in my head. The quiet behavior. The early morning. The careful words, and suddenly it all felt familiar again, like a performance I had already seen before, and I hated how quickly my mind jumped to the same conclusion, because if he was lying already, 3 days might have been 2 days too many. I didn't tell my wife right away that I wanted to wait before confronting him. She had already made up her mind. By the time I walked back into the house, she was sitting at the kitchen table with the meeting schedule in front of her like it was evidence in a courtroom. He lied within 24 hours, she said. I poured myself another cup of coffee even though I didn't want it. Maybe he mixed up the time. She gave me a look that made it clear she didn't appreciate the optimism. You know exactly what this is, she said. He needed a place to sleep for a few nights. That's all. I didn't respond immediately, because part of me was thinking the same thing. Addiction teaches you patterns. After enough years, you can almost predict the next move before it happens. Still, something about the way he had acted that morning didn't match the version of him we remembered. He looked different, I said. Different doesn't mean better, she replied. We sat in silence for a moment, then she leaned forward slightly. When he gets back tonight, you tell him to leave. Just like that, no argument. No discussion. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was protective, of the house, of the life we had rebuilt after he disappeared. I gave him 3 days, I reminded her. You gave him trust he hasn't earned, she said. Then she stood up and pushed the meeting schedule toward me. Call the place again if you want. Ask them yourself. I didn't. Instead I sat there staring at the circle time on the page, because something about this situation still felt incomplete, and that uneasy feeling only got stronger later that night. When my son finally came back. My son came back just after 9, the front door opened slowly, like he was trying not to make noise. But the moment he stepped inside, he saw both of us sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. He froze. That told me immediately he understood what this was about. Long meeting? My wife asked. Her tone was flat, almost polite. That was never a good sign. He looked from her to me. Yeah. It ran a little late. I slid the printed schedule across the table toward him. The place you listed doesn't have meetings on Tuesdays. For a moment he didn't react, then he looked down at the paper. Oh, he said quietly, just. Oh, no panic. No explanation. No defensive speech like he used to give. My wife leaned forward. So where were you really? Silence filled the room. He rubbed his hands together slowly, staring at the table like he was trying to find the right words between the scratches in the wood. I told you, he said after a moment. I met someone from a group. That's not what I asked, she replied. Her patience had officially run out. You lied. He didn't argue. That part made the situation even stranger. I didn't lie, he said carefully. I just didn't explain everything. My wife stood up immediately. That's the same thing. She looked at me. Tell him. The word hung there. Tell him to leave. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, my son reached into his jacket pocket again, and this time, what he placed on the table made the entire room go quiet in a completely different way. He placed a small stack of folded papers on the table. I picked up the top one and unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a schedule like the one we had seen before. Not exactly. These were attendance sheets, handwritten, every week for the past 6 months. His name was there. Signed, with a time and a brief note beside it. Check-ins, he said softly. Every Wednesday night. Sometimes extra sessions too. I've been going. 4 months. I froze. My wife's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked at me like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Neither could I. I wanted to ask why he hadn't told us. Why hide it? I finally whispered. He shrugged, almost apologetically. I wasn't ready for you to see. I wasn't sure I'd keep it up. Didn't want to make promises I couldn't keep. The room was silent. Heavy. Except for the faint hum of the fridge in the background. For a second, it felt like everything we feared, the broken locks, the missing money, the endless arguments, was a distant memory. Like the last year hadn't happened at all. Then the anger hit me. Do you realize how close we were to throwing you out again? I said, voice tighter than I expected. I do, he replied. I was scared you would. I wouldn't have blamed you. My wife finally spoke. You gave him 3 days, and we almost threw him out on the first night. All of this hiding. It nearly ruined everything before it even started. He nodded. Quietly, I didn't know if I deserved a chance. I just wanted one. I felt something in my chest shift. Relief? Pride? Confusion? All of it at once, but I also realized something else. Trust isn't rebuilt with papers or words alone, it's fragile. Fragile and fast. And it only takes a single moment to lose again. We sat there for what felt like hours, though the clock probably hadn't moved more than 20 minutes. I kept staring at the papers, at the neat little signatures and notes he'd made each week. Every single one a silent promise he had kept without anyone knowing. Part of me wanted to jump up, hug him, tell him it was enough, that he had proven himself. But another part, the part that had lived through years of theft, broken promises, and lies, kept my hands on the table. You realize this doesn't erase the past, I said finally. My voice was low, careful. We can't just forget everything. He nodded. Slowly. I know. I'm not asking you to. I wanted a chance. One chance to show it's different now. My wife looked at me then, and for the first time that night, I felt the full weight of her exhaustion. Her eyes weren't angry, they were wary. Skeptical. Protective of every small piece of peace we'd built back into our lives. 3 days, she reminded me. And that's it. Then we reevaluate. That's your chance. Not forever, not until you screw up again. He swallowed, a small flicker of shame in his expression. I understand. I won't waste it. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hope. But hope had always been the cruelest thing with him. Too much hope, and you got burned. Too little, and you missed the rare moments that were genuine. Trust, I realized, wasn't a switch. It wasn't a document or a confession. It was a careful balance, like walking across a thin, rickety bridge. One misstep, and it all fell apart. One careful step, and maybe, just maybe, you kept moving forward. That night, we didn't celebrate. We didn't even smile. We just sat together, aware that we had crossed a threshold we weren't sure we could hold. And I knew, in that quiet kitchen, that nothing was guaranteed, not forgiveness, not change, not even tomorrow. I woke to the smell of coffee and the soft hum of sunlight through the blinds. The house felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but quieter in a way that didn't make my chest tighten immediately. I wasn't ready to trust it yet. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already there, sitting at the table with a mug in both hands, eyes focused on the steam curling above it. Morning, he said softly. No hint of bravado, no teasing remarks, nothing familiar from the old days. I nodded, pouring my own cup. The clink of ceramic against the counter sounded unusually loud in the silence. My wife was already at the table too, scrolling through her phone but keeping one eye on him. She didn't speak immediately. I didn't push her, he spoke first. I made a list last night, he said, sliding a crumpled notebook toward me. Goals. Things I need to do before I leave here. Things I need to fix. In myself. I glanced down. The list was meticulous. Short-term goals, long-term goals, reminders of meetings, even notes about gratitude and things he wanted to apologize for personally to people he'd hurt. It almost felt like the son we had lost years ago had been replaced with someone else. Someone trying, in the quietest way possible, to undo the mess he had made, but part of me stayed skeptical. I had lived through too many tries. I had seen the best intentions crumble in a single night. Still. I felt something stir in my chest. Tentative hope. Okay, I said finally. Let's see how today goes. He nodded, careful not to smile too wide, not to jinx it, and for a few hours, everything seemed to hold. Fragile, yes, but real. Little did I know, the test wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. It was late afternoon when the quiet finally broke. My son was in the living room, carefully folding laundry like he had done every day since he arrived. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, hesitant, my mind racing with every what if I had lived through before. Part of me wanted to step forward, tell him everything was okay, let go of the fear that had kept me awake for years. But another part, the part that had learned from the past, held back. He looked up at me, eyes steady. Am I really allowed to stay? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't about permission. It wasn't about rules. It was about trust, about whether the years of pain we'd endured could be outweighed by months of quiet. Consistent effort. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words felt hollow. We'll see, I said finally. That wasn't a lie. It wasn't reassurance either. It was the truth. I didn't know if I could fully trust him yet. And even now, I wasn't sure if hope was enough to justify letting him stay. My wife came up behind me and rested a hand on my shoulder. Her gaze went to him, and I saw the same mixture of caution and desire to believe that I felt myself. He smiled faintly, like he understood, like he had been expecting an answer that didn't exist, and in that moment, I realized that some lessons don't have neat conclusions. Trust rebuilds slowly, but fear, disappointment, and doubt can return in an instant. I left the room without saying more. Because I didn't have the answer, and maybe that's the hardest part. Sometimes giving someone one last chance isn't about knowing what will happen. It's about deciding you're willing to take the risk, even when the answer might never come.